aside from using open source for conflict zones or using it to, for example, trace a person like Rob Rundo, you can also use it for something that is very beautiful. It's a beautiful story, actually, that you can use these techniques to also find more about the history that you didn't know before.
So on Discord, I came in touch with Chris, and Chris is also an open source researcher. He did several stories together with other Bellingcat researchers, and Chris and I found out that we have a similar family history. And after we had a conversation about that, Chris started looking into his family history a little bit more as well. And what's really cool is that Chris used a lot of different techniques that were different than mine. So today we're gonna talk to him about that. I'm just curious, can you tell other people a little bit more about everything that you found out after we had that conversation? Because it's been quite of a story for you.
Saw that you were busy with World War II photographs, and then I actually realized that I still had an internment camp card for my grandfather. It was laying around on the internet. He shares the same name as I do, but I never really had the opportunity or got the time to actually dive in on it. But there's a bit of a mystery about my grandfather, as my father was born in 1942 and he actually never met his real father. So he never knew what he looked like. He never could remember seeing him, and basically the man was one big mystery for us.
So it started with the internment card, and yeah, I have the same one from my grandfather. So I know that for example, the scans are really high quality and you can find out a little bit more information about the person that the card is about. So can you just take us through the journey that you've been on and all the interesting things that you found?
I grabbed the internment camp card, and what I first did was zoom in on the details that I could read and the details that I couldn't read. A lot of the things on the internment card are written in Japanese, as this happened during the Japanese occupation of Indonesia. I looked at it and realized that while I don't understand Japanese at all myself, I basically downloaded the camp card or made screenshots of it and uploaded it into Google Lens to use optical character recognition. And what that actually does for you is that you can grab a piece of text from an image and translate that into a translator with a DeepL or Google Translate to see what's on the card. And that's when I quickly discovered that my grandfather actually went to a very notorious internment camp called Fukuoka 2B in Nagasaki. And it is actually a camp that was mostly used for prisoners of war. I also discovered that he basically was liberated around September 1945. And if you look back at the events, August 1945 is when the atomic bomb, the Fat Man bomb, fell on Nagasaki. So what that actually told me is that he survived that atomic bomb.
There's a lot of information on the internet, special websites that keep track of all the list of names of people that were in different camps. So one of the things I found out was that a number that was written on the internment card is actually the prisoner number that my grandfather used to have. And I found the map of the prison or the internment camp that my grandfather was in. But for me, that's basically where my search stopped. I did a lot of searches, but I couldn't find a lot more information. But for you, the story continues.
I actually found a website called mansell.com, something in that direction, that has a lot of information, first on the camp and the circumstances that the prisoners of war were living in, including coordinates to satellite imagery that showed the place of the prisoner of war camp. It also has a memorial now there. I also discovered, oddly enough, that there are a lot of Facebook pages run by certain people that keep track of things that happen there, but also people like grandchildren, children from those prisoners of war seeking for more information. I basically sent the person running the Nagasaki Fukuoka camp page a message, and they basically told me that my grandfather, Johann Christian Osieck, that they had a feeling that he went to the US after the war. So he also sent me a document that basically said that he actually was on a ship called the SS Cisarua and was basically caught on the ocean between Indonesia heading towards Australia by the Japanese. And when I discovered that, I typed in Johann C. Osieck, then I grabbed the internment card camp again, and I basically used search queries, Google search operators, and that's when I discovered a website that basically mentioned a person with the same name and the same birthday coming from Baldwin Park in Los Angeles, California.
Because it was completely unknown, right? That he might or might have not traveled to the States, or his whereabouts.
It was unknown where he went to. It was unknown whether how long he did survive the atomic bomb, but it was a question where he went to afterwards. So when I looked at that, I saw that he was living in Baldwin Park, and then all of a sudden, I saw certain names were relatives of it. So when diving into those, I saw a certain name called Roland. I saw a certain name named Leah. And what actually stood out to me is that they were all born 10 years after my father. And then I kind of went back to the person who was running the Prisoner of War Camp Facebook page. And I basically asked him if he knew if my grandfather had any children. And that's when that person started sharing a picture of Roland that looked very similarly to how my father looked. The eyes are the same, the certain aspects are the same. So that's what I went further on. And I also looked further into certain details because America, the US, basically has a lot of things open. He also had a Doreen Osieck that was mentioned, so I also noted down that name. And unfortunately, I also discovered that Johann Christian Osieck already passed away in 1987. So I took all of that information, and then of course came the Remembrance, in Indonesia Remembrance Day. Annique pointed me out that a certain archive was opening for one day. And that's when I realized that that Johann Christian Osieck was also in it. There are certain requests for passports made, and people were given documents to get that passport, and on one of them it's his picture. I also saw that Osieck was married to Charlotte until 1949, and that's when they divorced. And basically he met a woman called Doreen Lamont, and that is basically the Doreen Osieck that I also saw in the US data. So that started to collect, and then that's when we first had our first sighting of my real grandfather.
So I think there's a cultural heritage center called CBG here in Holland, and I think they digitized 6 million passport requests of people that Dutch people that lived in Indonesia or Nederlands-Indië back then. They had a choice. You can either request a Dutch passport or you can become Indonesian. And you had to fill in a card. Either option was fine, but you had to fill in the card. They digitized it. Was a lot of work, which they got done pretty quickly with the help of volunteers. And again, OCR program like Chris described earlier. And like the internment camp cards, these scans are really high quality. And some give you extra information because some people were you had to be, of course, of Dutch nationality to get the passport. So some people were born Dutch, other people were married into Dutch nationality. And all this information, but also about in this case, our grandparents, their parents, do they have children, which address did they live, but also if they were married, the information about the person who they married, it's all on the card in very high quality. So it's a very unique resource, and it's only been available since, I think, the 15th of August was the National Liberation Day. So it hasn't been online very long. So yeah, that's a little bit about the passport card that Chris was talking about.
But I also questioned myself because Osieck basically went from Japan, where he was imprisoned, to Indonesia, and then all of a sudden he went to the US while he did request for a Dutch passport, which is quite, how did he skip the Netherlands while requesting it? Now that could be all kinds of certain reasons that you also see today with refugees, in the sense that they may have rejected his request. But what I discovered is that he basically took a boat called the SS Zuiderkruis, and a boat that departed from Rotterdam, and then he arrived in New York State with certain relatives, Doreen, his new wife, but also Roland, which showed me that basically Roland was, like my father, also born in Indonesia. However, what is very unfortunate is I tried to find them via Facebook, and I actually found Roland and Leah, and I basically sent them a message, but Roland unfortunately already passed away at 70 years of age, which means that he's younger than my father. Annique also did something to see if there were more family members or more information on Johan Christian Osieck, and we basically also discovered Cody Osieck, who later on is actually the son of Roland, who's actually my age, maybe a little older. He already has a child, but unfortunately I sent them a message to no response. But yeah, using OKR and using a lot of search operators that Google makes available for you, we managed to discover our treasure.
So yeah, the thing that started my interest, I was very curious to when my family arrived in Indonesia, and also with the conversations that we had, I wanted to dig deeper. So a couple weeks ago, I went to the National Archive. It's right here in the city where I live. And I requested the documents that they have on hand about my family. Turns out that somebody did a lot of work already into my whole genealogy, family tree, and took the time to write it down. So I think my grandfather's grandfather was born in or married in 1872 to a lady that came from Surabaya, and then their first child was born in 1874, also in Surabaya, but they were married in The Hague. So somewhere between 1872 and 1874, that's when my family came to Indonesia, we stayed there until my grandparents and my father and my aunt, when they were young, came to Holland. So that was basically my question that was answered. But you just said, unfortunately, no response from the people back in the United States. But are you happy with what you've found out? Like, is this enough for you? Are you going to try again or keep searching, or?
I think I'm content with the result that we have now, because we basically discovered the image behind the man who was a mystery, and how basically everything happened from there on. It answered also a lot of questions for my father, who had a lot of unanswered ones. I think those family members, those relatives that I didn't know of, it's a little bit difficult. At one point I would like to once have a conversation, but I think I also have to accept the fact that if they don't want that you have to respect that, because that's also an outcome that you have to be aware of, that once you do this kind of research, that maybe if you find a lost relative, or in my case a relative from actually somebody who's your father's younger brother and younger sister, that they might not respond, or they might not respond positively because it can be a shock to them.
So after all the research that you've done, what is some advice that you can give people that maybe hear your story, they feel inspired?
That if you really want to do so, I think you really have to first prepare yourself good for it. Know of certain outcomes that it may have. It can have very eye-opening results, such as me, who found that a lot, but in the end also have people or relatives not respond to you. Could also discover a lot of things that you would have rather not wanted to hear, maybe. So first of all, I suggest, like we do in open source research, in the case of ethics, to always mentally prepare yourself for what you're doing and taking the precautions before you start to dive into it. But once you've dived into it, it's something to really set your teeth in. Once you get going, you need to continue on, because it's easy to get lost. So you need to hold on to it tight. The information that is available, you need to connect to each other. And I think it's also, if you have family members who know something of that particular history, to include them, because it basically, I also saw it as a research project, not only of myself or with Annique, but also with my father, who connected a few dots. And if you have that, then I think you can get the best results and reveal a lot. But be aware that, like with geolocating an image or looking into a conflict zone or a research subject, that it can also have moments that are less pleasant and that can emotionally affect you.